What's up, guys? Welcome to my TikTok class where I talk all things Cooper and ABA. The last couple of videos we talked about the different levels of scientific understanding, and tonight we're continuing it with science and talking about the different attitudes and assumptions of science.
First up, we're talking about determinism.
This is basically the idea that everything happens for a reason. The universe is a lawful and orderly place. Things don't just happen willy-nilly, which means we can investigate phenomena with a scientific process. Okay, so this is a part 2 video on the different assumptions and attitudes of science. Next up, we're going to talk about empiricism. Empiricism has to do with observation and measurement. There's a really great quote from Cooper that says that objectivity in the sense of empiricism is that these measurements and observations are independent of individual prejudices, tastes, and private opinions of the scientists. Result of empirical methods are objective in that they are open to anyone's observation and do not depend on the subjective belief of the individual scientist. This will be really important when we get into validity and the characteristics of applied behavior analysis. And in sum, science is not political. Okie dokie, we are on part 3 of scientific assumptions and attitudes, and next we're going to be talking about experimentation. Experimentation is the most basic strategy of science, and it involves predicting and controlling any phenomena reliably. So this means that we're manipulating an independent variable to see its effect on a dependent variable. I talked about this in a previous video, but independent variable is the intervention. Dependent variable would be the behavior that you're measuring. The newest edition of Cooper also talks about functional analysis in this section. I will definitely make another video in the future just about functional analysis. But in this graph, you can see that we're manipulating different conditions to see its effect on the behavior, and we can see that the escape condition results in the highest number of responses for this student's behavior. Okay, this is a part 4 video on the different attitudes and assumptions of science. Next, we're talking about replication. It's required for an experiment to be repeated multiple times to prove that, in fact, the phenomena can be controlled by the manipulation of the independent variable. And an experiment can be replicated within a single subject design, which we will talk about more later. But we can see from the data that this was replicated one time in phase B2. The intervention of peer tutoring was effective a second time after it was removed and reintroduced. And it's important to replicate across different individuals and as many times as possible to prove that, in fact, this intervention is effective. Stay tuned for the next 2 videos on philosophic doubt and parsimony. Okay, now we're talking about philosophic doubt. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. I think it's super important, so let's get into it. Philosophic doubt is basically just a healthy amount of skepticism when you're looking at a phenomena. So when looking at research studies, we ask questions. We ask questions about the data. We ask questions about if the intervention was implemented correctly. And these healthy criticisms and skepticisms are very good for the field because it helps us grow. And as new scientific evidence comes to light, we should be going in the direction that the data shows us to go in. I think this can be something that's hard for Americans especially to understand, but it is okay to criticize something that you like to make it better. And we're here to the last video on the assumptions and attitudes of science, and we're going to be talking about the law of parsimony. Basically, all this means is keep it simple, stupid. When looking at explanations of behavior, we always want to rule out the simple answer first. So for example, if a nonverbal learner was hitting their ear, we would rule out medical variables. Maybe they have an ear infection. Maybe something hurts. Maybe they got something stuck in the ear. We want to look for the most simple answer first. So let's say someone was like, well, Mercury's in retrograde. They're just acting like this because Mercury is in retrograde. No, we want to rule out the simple explanation first, which is that they have an ear infection and they just need some medication to help with that quick fix.